The streets at dawn were almost empty, except for fishermen unloading their catch and the quiet hum of shopkeepers opening early. Alara loved this time of day, though she rarely had the chance to enjoy it. Most mornings, she was too tired to notice anything except the aching weight in her legs. Her life had become a cycle of work, sleep, and more work. At the hospital, she took every extra shift offered, even if it meant skipping meals or missing calls from friends. All the money went straight into a joint account, though joint was a generous word, since most of it was for Damien. Rent, utilities, groceries, his textbooks, and the endless stream of small expenses that came with his medical school dreams. She covered them without hesitation. Damien's focus, he always said, needed to be entirely on his studies. They had met 3 years ago at a charity clinic where Alara volunteered. He was charming, ambitious, and spoke about saving lives with such conviction that she felt honored to be part of his journey. She told herself she wasn't just building a future with him, she was building a bridge, sturdy enough for them both to cross into a better life. But lately, there were cracks in the planks. Damien's once eager calls to check if she got home safe had dwindled into short, distracted texts hours later. Nights that used to be filled with study sessions at their small kitchen table turned into nights when he claimed to be at the library or with classmates she'd never met. When she asked about the long gaps in his day, he smiled faintly and said she worried too much. Alara tried to push away the unease. After all, the bridge she was building wasn't just made of money. It was built on trust. And trust, she believed, meant not poking holes in someone's explanations. Still, sometimes, lying in bed while the clock ticked past midnight, she imagined shadows pooling in the corners of their apartment, stretching long fingers toward her, whispering doubts she didn't want to hear. The nights were the worst. The city beyond their window glowed with signs and streetlights, and she wondered if Damien was out there under those same lights, walking streets she didn't know, with people whose names she'd never hear. She would bury herself under the blanket, reminding herself of the sacrifices she'd made, convincing herself they were worth it. Bridges didn't crumble overnight, she thought. They only weakened if you stopped repairing them. And she wasn't ready to stop. But deep down, she couldn't ignore it forever. The bridge was beginning to sway. The air along Valamont's harbor was warm that evening, the scent of salt water mingling with fried seafood from the small stalls lining the pier. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp against the steady rhythm of waves hitting the wooden posts. Alara leaned against the railing, her eyes following the horizon where the sun bled into the sea, streaks of gold and deep crimson stretching far and wide. She loved this place. It was where she and Damien had shared some of their happiest moments, and tonight she hoped it would be one of them again. Damien stood beside her, his hands tucked in the pockets of his navy coat. He'd been quiet since they left the apartment, glancing at his phone more than once as if waiting for a message. When he finally turned to her, the faint smile on his lips seemed rehearsed, but his words were warm enough to melt her guard. He spoke about the future, about how, when he graduated, they would finally get married. No more struggling to pay bills, no more late nights alone. He promised they'd find a little house near the hospital he'd work at, with a kitchen big enough for her to cook the dishes she always said she missed from her childhood. She wanted to believe him so badly that the doubt knotting in her chest felt like a betrayal of its own. She watched his mouth form the words, but she noticed his eyes didn't quite meet hers. They lingered on the water, or somewhere just over her shoulder, like he was speaking to the air instead of her. Alara reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "I can wait," she said. "As long as it takes. I just need to know we're headed in the same direction." Damien's grip tightened for a brief moment before he pulled her closer into a half embrace. "We are," he said, his voice soft but almost too measured, like he was making sure the tone landed just right. He kissed her hair and laughed when a breeze tousled it against his face. From a distance, to anyone watching, they looked like a couple in perfect harmony. But as the last sliver of sun disappeared beyond the water, Alara felt a cold ripple inside her. The conversation had been filled with promises, yet none of them came with details. No exact dates, no real plans, only a vision painted in broad strokes. She told herself trust was stronger than suspicion, that love was the anchor keeping them steady. Still, she couldn't shake the thought that maybe the anchor wasn't holding as tightly as she wanted to believe. When they walked back down the pier, hand in hand, Damien's phone buzzed. He slipped it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and quickly shoved it back without a word. Alara pretended not to notice, but the sound echoed in her mind all the way home. The sunset had been beautiful, but the shadows it left behind felt colder than the night. Drumming steadily against the apartment windows, blurring the lights of the city outside. Alara stood in the small laundry nook, sorting clothes into piles, her hands moving automatically through the familiar routine. Damien had left for the library hours earlier, or at least that's what he said. His absence had become a pattern, one she tried not to think too hard about. When she reached for a crumpled shirt at the bottom of the hamper, her fingers brushed against a patch of fabric that felt stiff. She pulled it out, the pale blue cotton catching the dim light, and there it was. Dark, rusty stains spread across the front and down one sleeve. Blood. The sight froze her for a moment, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Alara lifted the shirt closer, her eyes scanning the pattern of the stains. It wasn't the kind of small spot you'd get from a paper cut or a nosebleed. This looked heavier, splattered, like it came from sudden impact. She tried to think of any recent injury Damien might have had, but nothing came to mind. The last time she'd seen him that morning, he looked fine. No limp, no bandage, not even a scratch on his face. When Damien returned later that night, shaking off his wet coat, she held up the shirt without a word. His eyes flicked to it, then to her, and in that fraction of a second she saw something, an almost imperceptible pause like a calculation. Then came the explanation, smooth and even. He'd been helping a classmate move a broken cabinet, dropped it on his hand, and cut himself. Nothing serious? He smiled faintly, as if reassuring a worried child. But Alara was a nurse. She'd seen every kind of injury there was, and this didn't match his story. The way the stains were spread, the depth of color. This wasn't from a small cut on the hand. Still, she nodded, folding the shirt and setting it aside as if she believed him. She didn't trust herself to speak. The rest of the night passed in a strange quiet. They ate dinner together, but their conversation was shallow, circling safe topics like weather and work. Alara could feel the space between them, not measured in inches, but in something colder, an absence of openness, of the easy warmth they once had. When Damien went to bed, she stayed up on the couch, the rain still falling outside. She thought about the shirt again, and an unsettling question lodged itself in her mind. If the blood wasn't his, then whose was it? And why did he lie so easily? The shadows in the apartment felt thicker that night, pressing against the walls. The hospital was unusually busy that afternoon, the sound of hurried footsteps and ringing phones blending into the low murmur of patients waiting to be seen. Alara had just finished checking on an elderly man with pneumonia when the emergency doors swung open. A young woman, pale and visibly shaken, was escorted in by a paramedic. Blood had soaked through the bandage wrapped around her forearm, and droplets trailed onto the floor as they moved her toward an empty bed. Alara stepped forward, instinct taking over. She helped the woman onto the bed, speaking in the calm, practiced tone she used with all patients. "I'm Alara. I'm going to take care of you, all right?" The woman nodded faintly, her eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. As Alara unwrapped the makeshift bandage, her stomach tightened. The injury was deep and jagged, more like a defensive wound than an accident. Blood still seeped steadily from the cut, and Alara could already tell it would take several stitches to close. But it wasn't the severity of the wound that made her hands pause. It was the way the blood had dried and smeared along the sleeve. The pattern was unmistakable, a chilling echo of the stains she had found on Damien's shirt days earlier. For a moment, she almost froze, but years of training kept her moving. She cleaned the wound carefully, telling herself it was just coincidence. As she worked, the woman's wrist shifted slightly, and that's when Alara saw it, a silver locket hanging from a thin chain around her neck. The metal caught the light, and her eyes focused on the engraving, two neat initials etched into the surface, DC. Her breath caught. The room seemed to close in, the beeping of monitors fading beneath the rush of her heartbeat. She forced her hands to stay steady as she prepared the needle and thread, but every loop of the stitch felt heavier, like she was sewing together pieces of a truth she didn't want to finish. The woman finally spoke, her voice soft but edged with something sharp. "I was in the wrong place at the wrong time," she said, almost like she was rehearsing a line. She didn't elaborate, and Alara didn't push, though every part of her wanted to. When the last stitch was tied, Alara stepped back, giving a polite smile she didn't feel. Her mind was already racing. Who was Serena Hale to Damien? Why was she wearing something engraved with his initials? And most of all, how did she end up with an injury that matched the bloodstains on his shirt? As she walked away, the weight of the unanswered questions pressed down on her chest. She told herself she would confront him, but deep down, she feared the answers more than the silence. The following Saturday, Damien told Alara he'd be spending the afternoon studying at a classmate's apartment. His tone was casual, his smile practiced, but something in the way he avoided meeting her eyes made Alara's skin prickle. She waited until he left, then grabbed her coat and quietly slipped out a few minutes later, keeping enough distance to avoid being noticed. She followed him through the winding streets of Valemont until the scenery shifted from familiar markets and small cafes to the polished facades of Hollow Ridge District, a place she rarely visited. Here, the sidewalks were spotless. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne from boutique storefronts, and glass towers gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Damien walked with purpose, his pace quick but unhurried, until he stopped in front of an upscale apartment building with gold-trimmed doors. Alara ducked behind a parked car, her breath shallow as she watched him greet the doorman with the ease of someone who had been there before. The elevator swallowed him, and she hesitated only a moment before slipping in through the door just as another resident exited. She kept to the far end of the hallway when she found the right floor, the sound of her heartbeat almost drowning out the faint murmur of voices. As she drew closer, she saw one door ajar, just enough to reveal Damien inside, his arm wrapped around Serena Hale. They were standing close, their lips meeting in a kiss so intimate that Alara felt her stomach twist. For a second, she couldn't move. It wasn't just the betrayal that rooted her in place. It was the way Damien looked at Serena, the tenderness she thought had been reserved for her. A part of her wanted to storm in, to demand answers, but her eyes caught on something else. On the coffee table beside them was a thick envelope. The flap hung open, revealing a stack of photographs. From where she stood, Alara could make out her own face in one of them, captured as she left the hospital, unaware she was being watched. She stepped closer, her breath quickening. The top photo had her home address written in bold ink, circled twice in red. A cold, creeping dread spread through her chest. This wasn't just an affair. There was something calculated here, something that felt like a trap. She backed away, careful not to let the floorboards creak, and retreated down the hallway until she reached the stairwell. By the time she reached the street, the sharp evening air bit at her cheeks. Her hands shook as she gripped her phone, torn between calling the police and confronting Damien outright. The image of him kissing Serena replayed in her mind, but it was the sight of her address circled in red that stayed with her. It wasn't only her heart that was in danger now. Something darker was unfolding, and she had no idea how deep it went. The apartment felt smaller than usual that night, the walls closing in as Alara waited for Damien to return. The photographs she had seen in Serena's apartment played over in her mind, each image sharp and deliberate. She had told herself she would wait for the right moment, but the moment was now, before the fear took root so deeply that she wouldn't be able to speak. The door finally opened, and Damien stepped inside, shrugging off his coat. He looked tired, but his eyes sharpened when he saw her standing in the middle of the kitchen, hands clasped in front of her. "You're home early," he said, trying for casual, but his voice carried an edge. "I followed you," Alara said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "I saw you with her. I saw the photographs. My address circled in red, Damien. What is going on?" For a moment, he froze. Then his expression shifted, the mask slipping just enough to reveal something colder underneath. "You had no right to follow me," he said, stepping closer. "You're making things bigger than they are." "They're already big enough," she shot back. "Who's taking those pictures of me? Why is my name in her apartment?" He reached for the counter, bracing himself as if to keep his temper in check, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. In the next second, his hand shot out, shoving her hard against the edge of the counter. The sudden impact knocked the breath from her lungs. A knife from the drying rack tipped over and clattered to the floor. Alara instinctively reached for it, not to attack, but to create space between them. Damien grabbed her wrist, twisting it sharply. She felt the burn of his grip, the pressure enough to bruise. "Put it down," he hissed. She tried to pull away, but in the struggle, her palm slid along the blade. The sting was instant and hot, followed by the warm spill of blood that dripped onto the cold tile. The sight of it, her own blood, hit her harder than the pain. Damien didn't flinch. He let go of her wrist and stepped back, watching her clutch her hand in silence. There was no apology in his eyes, no concern, only a strange, simmering anger, as if she had forced him into this moment. "You've been making sacrifices for a man who would do this to you," she said, her voice breaking, more to herself than to him. He said nothing, just turned away, grabbing his coat as though the conversation was over. The door slammed behind him, leaving the apartment heavy with the smell of metal from the blood and the echo of her own ragged breathing. Alara sank to the floor, pressing a dish towel to her wound. The realization settled in like ice. Whatever bridge she thought she had been building was gone. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was survival. Maya's apartment was on the 5th floor of a modest building overlooking one of Valamont's busier streets. At night, the glow from the street lamps spilled through the thin curtains, painting the walls in shifting patterns as cars passed below. It should have felt safe, but to Alara, it was only a temporary shelter, a place to breathe without fear of hearing Damien's key in the lock. Maya had been quick to offer her a place to stay after seeing the bruises on her arm and the fresh bandage around her palm. She didn't press for details, only said, "You can stay as long as you need," in that firm, protective tone that left no room for refusal. During the day, Alara moved slowly, helping with small chores, trying to keep her mind occupied. But the nights were harder. She would lie awake on the couch, the faint hum of the city filtering in through the windows, and think about the man she'd spent years building a life with. Damien's face came to her in fragments, his smile when they first met, the way he used to kiss her forehead before leaving for class, the warmth in his voice when he spoke about their future. All of it felt like scenes from someone else's story now. She didn't cry from the physical pain, though her hand still throbbed if she moved it too much. The tears came from something deeper, a hollow ache where trust used to be. She had believed in him completely, given him her time, her savings, her loyalty, and in return, he had given her fear. Maya would sometimes find her sitting on the couch long after midnight, staring out the window at the city lights. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," she would say gently, setting a mug of tea beside her. Alara would nod, though she wasn't sure if she agreed. How do you stop grieving someone who is still alive? The city outside glittered as if nothing had happened, the shop signs and car headlights blinking in careless rhythm. Somewhere out there, Damien was living as if she didn't exist, maybe even laughing with Serena, while Alara was left to pick apart the pieces of the life she thought they shared. She told herself that hiding was only temporary, that she would figure out her next move soon. But in the quiet hours of the night, with the streets still busy far below, she felt as if the entire city had turned its back on her, leaving her to face the darkness alone. The hospital's midday rush was in full swing when Alara spotted Damien standing near the reception desk. He was out of place in the crisp, white-lit corridor, his expensive coat and polished shoes drawing glances from patients and staff alike. The moment their eyes met, he put on that familiar look, brows furrowed in concern, mouth soft with practiced sympathy. "Alara?" he said, stepping toward her as if the weeks of silence and bruises hadn't happened. "I've been worried. You disappeared. I didn't know if you were safe." She had prepared herself for this, but still his voice made her chest tighten. Not with longing, those days were over, but with the sharp memory of every lie he'd ever told. She kept her expression neutral, her grip tightening on the envelope hidden in her coat pocket. "I'm fine," she replied, her tone flat. "What do you want?" His lips curved into a faint smile, as though they were merely having a disagreement that could be smoothed over with charm. "I just want to talk. We can work through this. You've always been the one who kept us together." It was then she saw it clearly, the calculation in his eyes. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about control. Damien wasn't here because he loved her. He was here because she had slipped beyond his reach, and that unsettled him. She took a step closer, her voice low but steady. "Do you remember every extra shift I worked? Every bill I paid so you could study? Every time I put your needs above mine?" He hesitated, sensing the shift in her tone. "All of that," she continued, pulling the envelope from her pocket, "was because I believed we were building something together. But I see now it was only building you, your ambition, your ego, your cruelty." She pressed the envelope into his hand. It was lighter than it had been in years, everything she had left after scraping together her savings. "This is the last thing you'll ever take from me. After this, there's nothing between us. Not money, not love, not even hate. Nothing." Damien opened his mouth as if to argue, but she turned and walked away before he could speak. She didn't look back, not even when she felt his stare burning into her back. Each step down the corridor felt like a weight lifting, though her legs trembled from the adrenaline. By the time she reached the staff lounge, her hands were cold, but her heart was steady. She knew this wasn't the end of Damien's interference. Men like him didn't let go easily. But for the first time in years, she had drawn a line he could not cross. 2 days after her final encounter with Damien at the hospital, Alara sat in the small interview room at the Valamont Police Department. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, the white walls bare, except for a clock that seemed to tick louder with each passing second. She had been carrying the evidence in a small folder for weeks. Photographs of her injuries, medical reports she had quietly filed under her own name, and most importantly, the images she had taken of the envelope and its contents in Serena's apartment. Detective Harris, a steady-eyed man in his 40s, listened without interrupting as Alara told her story. She didn't hold back this time. Every bruise, every lie, every moment she had been made to feel unsafe. When she described the night Damien pushed her against the counter and the knife cut into her palm, Harris leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "You're sure about the locket?" he asked. "The one with Damien's initials?" "Yes," Alara said firmly. "And the injury Serena had. It matched the bloodstains on Damien's shirt that I found in our laundry. I'm a nurse. I know what I saw." Harris nodded, flipping through the photos. We've had an open file on an assault case involving Serena Hale. She never named the attacker, but what you're giving me could change that. For the first time in weeks, Alara felt something that wasn't fear, it was resolve. She signed the statement, handed over her folder, and watched as Harris slid it into a larger evidence envelope. "We'll be in touch," he assured her. The investigation moved faster than she expected. Within days, officers visited her again to confirm timelines and take her phone for message retrieval. She learned that Damien's financial records were also being scrutinized, revealing questionable transactions and ties to people linked with violent altercations. When the arrest came, it was quiet but decisive. Damien was taken into custody outside a cafe in Hollow Ridge, his confident expression replaced by something she had never seen on him before: panic. She wasn't there to see it in person, but Maya sent her a photo from the newsfeed. For Alara, it was enough. The trial date was set within a month. The man who had once stood beside her making promises at sunset was now facing charges that could strip him of everything: his reputation, his career, his freedom. Alara knew it wouldn't erase what he had done to her, but it was a start. Walking out of the police station that day, she felt the cool autumn air on her face and realized something important. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was reclaiming her life, one truth at a time. The winter storms had passed, and spring had settled quietly over Valemont. The air was still cool, but the sky was clear, streaked with soft shades of pink and orange as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Alara stood at the far end of the Old Harbor Pier, the wood creaking faintly beneath her feet, the smell of salt water wrapping around her like a familiar embrace. It had been months since the trial. Damien was serving his sentence now, his name dragged through court records and news headlines. Serena had testified, her voice shaking but steady, and Alara had sat just a few rows behind, offering silent strength. The verdict hadn't brought joy exactly, but it had brought a deep, quiet relief, like a wound finally beginning to close. Her own scars had healed in the time since, though faint lines still marked her palm, pale against the skin. She would catch herself tracing them sometimes, not with shame, but as a reminder of what she had survived. They were proof that she had endured something meant to break her, and that she had walked away stronger. Life had taken on a new rhythm. She had moved into a small apartment closer to the hospital, decorated it with plants and photographs that made the space feel like hers alone. Maya still dropped by often, usually bringing pastries and an unspoken understanding of the quiet days and the busy ones. Alara had begun running in the mornings, letting the cold air fill her lungs, feeling her body reclaim its strength in each stride. Standing there on the pier now, she watched the waves crash against the rocks, the spray catching the fading light. The sound was loud but soothing, a reminder that even in chaos, there could be something constant and grounding. Her sacrifice, she realized, had never been wasted. It had been the price she paid to walk away, to rebuild herself from the pieces Damien had tried to scatter. The blood and the tears had marked her, yes, but they had also carved out a space for resilience, for the kind of strength that doesn't shout but endures. She closed her eyes, breathing in the salt-heavy air. Somewhere behind her, the city moved on, indifferent to her story. But here, at the edge of the water, she didn't need the city to care. She cared enough for herself now. When she opened her eyes again, the horizon stretched wide and unbroken before her. She turned from the waves, her steps steady on the worn planks of the pier, walking back toward a life that was hers alone, unshakable, unafraid, and free.